Church versus the state. Every Christian nation recognizes the importance of a separation of church and state. Even in tacit theocracies, such as Britain, whose secular leader serves as the head of the church, the crown does not interfere in church operations. But why do not even Christian theocracies find it impossible to merge the activities of church and state? Why is there no true theocracy? Both church and state understand the roles are distinct. The Pope has no power in Italy. The British throne and the head of the Anglican Church are two distinct offices contained in the same person. The state does not intervene in the church, in the most secular of countries such as the Scandinavian nations. Despite the differences between them, neither office believes the other role is redundant. But if the church is not under the state, and the state no answerable to the church, what relationship does one have with the other? If the state is not over the church, what authority does the church have? The tension and the pact between church and state is due to the belief each is over a distinct realm. The church is over spiritual matters and the state over the physical realm. But despite that division of duties, there remains a degree of uneasiness. The material realm often seems to intrude on the spiritual one, and vice versa. Who has the primary responsibility for education? What is the intent of the teacher? Many otherwise secular nations permit religious schools and an education that centers on spiritual matters. Others would like to take religion out of schools but find it difficult to negate all religious concerns. It seems impossible to eliminate religious concerns from sex education, for example. How do we teach history without discussion the impact Christianity has had on the history of white nations? But the position of the church is weakened by the multiplicity of religions and their doctrines. If Catholics are permitted their schools, why not Muslims and Jews as well as others? Secularism is often viewed as a compromise with the various religions. The solution appears to consist of banning all religious instruction to prevent seeming to favor one above the others. But only a radical far-left atheist cannot see that if this is permitted, secularism must accept the role of religious educator. Observations always need an interpretation, and in this vein, secularism is a religion as any of the other conventional ones. What a family is dependent on one's religion. There is no natural definition of family nor for any of the other way we define words. If you think life is defined by nature rather than by man informed by religious bias, one is sorely deluded, if not brainwashed. There is nothing objective about the way we define mankind or what is a crime. All definitions are necessarily analytical. Nature does not give us language. Liberals tend to be of the belief that if it is not found in nature, it does not have a real existence. But this is a product of their religion. Secularists are phenomenological. The only truth for them is what comes through the senses. The brain is considered to be a multidimensional camera that observes reality through the senses and recreates it using electrical signals. Science is a way to confirm the signal. Our minds might think we see the sunrise, but science cannot confirm this observation, and so we then realize it is actually the spin of the earth that gives us this impression of the rising and setting of the sun. The state serves the function of an arbiter between the various interpretations of reality. Without the state, two views about which person owns a house would be settled by violence. The state serves as an arbiter between the two parties and settles the issue judicially backed by the state's monopoly of the use of violence to settle issues. Naturally, the state wields the judicial sword. This ensures its decisions can and will be implemented. Liberalism is a movement to allow more freedom from judicial overview. Yet, conversely, if people are free to live however they wish, the laws protecting this liberty must be even more draconian. When marriage is a bond between one man and one woman, the government only needs to restrict recognition to intersex unions. But when marriage is open to any and every possible union, the state must enact draconian laws to protect these unions from being attacked by more conservative groups. Which gives rise to the assertion that the far right are dangerous radicals. If the law ceases to make theft illegal, then the far right will be those people who have property they want to protect, and the stealer of property will become an oppressed class in need of protection from the far right. If there is a class that is not doing well, but that wants the same benefits and living standard as those who work, this group will need to be defined, by law, as an oppressed class. Once a group is deserving of special protections and rights, those who work will be considered a hate group. Anyone who opposes what they worked for, being taken from them, to benefit another group, will be seen as a far-right hate group. The point, of course, is that if we only got what we paid for, the need for the law and the designation of hate group would no longer be needed. Indeed, if everyone was paid for the value they created and no one had a right to anything they did not create, there would be little need for the state or its laws. If a legal marriage was between a man and a woman, the state would not have much to regulate. The problem with the traditional view of reality is that it gives the state nothing to do. Marriage as a union between a man and a woman can be easily overseen by the church. The state does not see the far right as a hate group because it has different policies, it is a hate group because it opposes the state and its overreach. The far right do not oppose policy, it opposes the draconian presence of the state in the operation of the church. Hatred of the right by the state makes the state the enemy of the church. As the power and influence of the state grows, the realm of the church is diminished. In the view of the state, the church is a radical organization. To radicalize thought is to push culture towards the Christian view of things. Radicals simplify the law and makes culture conform to the teachings of Scripture. The church always appears radical because it forgoes the agency of the state. If we gave no one a reason to doubt our word, and we had faith in them, what need would there be for the state? To be radical is to be anti-state. To be a far-right, white radical, is to be a white Christian. The state is, in this sense, the Antichrist. Christ builds the church, but the state is the antithesis of the church. The state and church exist as inversely related opposites. How more antithetical to the church can anything be? A radical is free of the matrix. Radical freedom is taken, not given. The radical takes liberty by his or her own hand, it is not given in metered doses, by the state. The liberal is free by means of negotiation and special pleading. Liberal rights are given and so exist as legal rights, not as natural rights. Legal rights are as easily taken and negated as they are given. The state is predicated on power. Thus, the state and church are not just two different ways of organizing, they are categorically different worldviews. One can be in one but not both, one can embrace one but not the other. Anyone who claims to be Christian and political is not a radical. But in the minds of many Christians, the church is an institution under the state, rather than an alternative. They have been domesticated and de-radicalized. No one can be both under the law and not under the law. It has to be one or the other. The state operates under the law because it operates by power. The law serves to regulate power to reduce the level of spontaneous violence. But the law does not eliminate violence or remove it as the central feature. Indeed, the law makes the state the key possessor of power. But the law is not based on anything objective. The life under the law is not natural. Without power, law is merely a preference or a statement of values. Without the power to enforce a law, the law is irrelevant. Even though the law regulates the use of power, without the power to enforce the law cannot regulate power. The power to enforce the law is the power to make and change the law. Thus, the law is ultimately an expression of the state's willingness to regulate its use of power. But as said, the power to give rights is the same power that can be used to remove rights. So, what is given by the law is always contingent on the goodwill of the state for its continued existence. The church has no power because ultimately power betrays faith. If it requires power to enforce, it is not natural. If a member of the church can revoke their word, no one can have faith in them. If the church has the right and power to change its doctrines at any time, it is not a church anyone can rely on. The church has no power but is required to implement Scripture because Scripture expresses the natural way to live. Without any power to enforce its will, the church is forced to rely on faith. We are forced to trust one another. But we cannot expect others to be faithful if we are not faithful. This is why trust has to be mutual. When we no longer trust each other, we resort to being under the state. We allow ourselves to be oppressed, so we will not be oppressed by others, whom we do not trust. But this is only half of the problem. We cannot trust anyone based on their claim that they are trustworthy. True faith is based on evidence. The better the evidence, the more faith we can have. Faith is not based on first-person attestations. There must be more than subjective impressions if we are to trust one another. If there is the possibility the other person will betray our confidence, it is in human nature to assume they will. If we do not live naturally, we must live as the state requires us to live. There needs to be an objective measure